Well, between miniseries podcasts and documentaries, you could say our fascination with cults borders on cultural obsession. Here to explain the allure for both those inside and outside is Ashlyn Welts Hilliard, cult intervention specialist and the founder of People Leave Cults. Ashlyn, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me this morning.
So you are in town for a show Wednesday at the Florida Theater, but your face, your name will be familiar to people who kind of absorb a lot of this content, and there is a lot of it out there. As we
Totally.
mentioned, there's a million podcasts, there's all kinds of miniseries, there's a lot on Netflix. Um, First of all, just tell us how you got involved in the first place in cult intervention.
Sure. And I appreciate your question. There's very few of us out there who do sort of cult intervention work. So I first got started 7 years ago. I primarily grew up in Utah. I was in a military family. So I was raised there from like fourth grade on. And I came to college actually down here in Florida, moved back to Utah after school, and really wanted to get involved in my community with people who had been through some sort of major transition in their life, either with a faith transition or a loss of community. And I found a nonprofit that I shortly after became a case manager for. And I helped those who were exiting diverse Mormon fundamentalist polygamous groups all across the Western US. So many people will be familiar with like Warren Jeffs, the FLDS, or maybe the Apostolic United Brethren community, the Kingston Clan. So I really worked with women, children, and even young men exiting these types of groups who had experienced a lot of abuse, or maybe women who are fleeing for safety, who are at high risk for trafficking, and just really loved being there with them on that journey of helping them towards recovery. And from there, 7, almost 8 years later, I've worked with so many survivors from so many different types of groups all across the world.
You actually earned your master's in the psychology of coercive
Yeah.
control, which I didn't even realize was a thing, but it is a fascinating area to study. And so, what did that teach you, and what has your hands-on work taught you about the psychology of coercive control?
Sure. So what was really interesting about the program, and you're right in that it actually is the only program that exists that solely focuses on the psychology of coercive control. It's a program run by colleagues of mine in the UK at the University of Salford. And I had already had these sort of front lines experience of working with survivors leading up to this program. But I really wanted also an academic perspective. I wanted to be able to do my own research, which I then did and got it published on the experiences of those in cults who experience reproductive coercion specifically. And after my professional studies and also my real life encounters with survivors and other professionals in the field, what I learned the most about coercive control is that, and what I love to explain to people is when you're in the middle of it, it's so hard to recognize when it's happening. It's usually not until you sort of are in a place where you could be reflexive about your experience, or when things maybe get so bad that you sort of can come up for air and be like, oh my gosh, all these horrible things have been happening to me, and that's just not okay. But when you're in it, it's so hard to see when you're in an abusive relationship or group.
Doesn't it? It seems that a lot of times people are in cults where they are defending the organization and
Hmm.
saying this is not a cult. It does seem if somebody is kind of presenting to you with a claim that something that you're in is a cult, that would sort of raise some initial red flags.
What cults do really well is they redefine for people what a cult is. So they change the actual definition. You may go into a group thinking that you know a definition of what it to be, but when you see around you really good people, and there are really good people who exist in cults who maybe were, vulnerable to something and manipulated and led into a group environment. But, it's hard because when people come at you and say, hey, you're in a cult, even out of a place of concern, it usually just drives people further into the group. It like shuts down that higher level thinking for them. And the term cult itself can be used as what I like to call a thought terminating cliche. It can cause defensiveness. It's a label that still has a lot of stigma. Not many people can understand. It's used as a pejorative as well.
You talk about people, who are nice people in cults, and in fact, I think a lot of people join cults because they really are
Hmm.
nice people.
Yeah.
A lot of the cults present as an opportunity to do your best work, to find something fulfilling and meaningful in the world and the
Totally.
universe. And so it seems that the people who enter, I think sometimes society views them as suckers or something for falling into it, but very often it seems like they're led by their best instincts.
Yeah. I like to tell people that cults recruit the best and the brightest among us
Hmm.
because not many people can hang with the demands that a high demand group asks of you, whether your time, your finances, the routine, the structure. They want really intelligent, creative, smart people. And I think like one of the biggest sort of myths that I have to dispel is that people are stupid for getting involved in these groups. It can happen to absolutely any of us. Absolutely any of us.
And so, what are if you're just existing in the world outside of a cult right now, what are the things that you would tell people to be vigilant to watch for if they're concerned either about themselves or perhaps a child or a loved one?
Yeah. I think it starts with relationships. If we're not able to have a relationship with someone who we think may be in a suspected group or relationship, then we have no idea sort of where they're at in their cult journey, their sort of timeline, I guess you can
What do
say.
you mean not allowed to have a relationship with them?
No, so when you have a relationship with someone, it gives you an insight as to where they are. So I think sometimes what happens is when someone's in a suspected cult or relationship that we think is abusive, maybe we ourselves withdraw. And that's not what we want to do at all. We want to maintain healthy relationship with them as much as they'll let you in, because that can give us insight about their experience, positive, negative, benign, what they're going through. We want to be that source of rapport for them. We want to continue to build that so that if they start experiencing discomfort in their current situation, we can be the person who they come to. I encourage people to not be critical of their loved one's situation so that they can be open and honest about what's going on.
You have in your work compared the allure and the ultimate entrapment sometimes of a cult to other societal groups, whether it's gang activity
Hmm.
or domestic terrorism, domestic violence,
Yeah.
in some cases, sex trafficking, kind of all
Yeah.
using similar models. Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. So when it comes to these sort of, I like to see like coercive control as almost like this umbrella. And underneath that umbrella, there's these different domains where coercive control can exist. Sex trafficking is a domain, just like gangs can be a domain, radicalization, cult involvement, as well as one on one abusive relationships. And coercive control is the mechanism used for harm within those distinct settings. There's a lot of overlap as to how like coercive control may look like in a gang and also how it can look like in a cult. There may be a lot of similarities, but also some distinct differences. For example, in a gang, it's not uncommon for them to have some sort of shared clothing representation, like on the exterior, as to what they stand for. And that's also common within cults as well. So there's a lot of similarities between these domains as well as differences.
Are cults necessarily bad?
Not always. And I say that with the caveat of people use the term expecting them to be a negative thing. It's like used as a pejorative, I guess you could say. What I like to tell people is cults for some have saved lives for a time. Maybe along that journey, they became more abusive. Synanon, for example. Synanon was a really well-known group. There's a great documentary on HBO Max you can watch. It started out as addicts helping addicts. And it wasn't until Synanon got funding, more public recognition, that Charles Diedrich, their leader, really took things off the rails and it became not at all what it used to be for people. So communities for a time for folks can be healthy, can be good, but it's usually not until later on, once the group has its hooks in them, where it can become abusive.
What about cult leaders? I mean, are they themselves susceptible to the tropes of becoming a cult leader? I mean, as you say, some of these groups start fairly benign or with very good
Hmm.
intentions, and then sometimes control almost takes control of the cult leader.
Definitely. I mean, I oftentimes get asked, like, does the cult leader, are they always a malignant narcissist, right? Do they always know the harm that they're enacting, or do they operate by good intentions and they like, they see a vision and they're trying to carry it out? But to me, that it's almost like their intent doesn't matter because if there is abuse going on in the group and they know that there's abuse going on in the group and they don't do anything to change the dynamics to ensure a healthy community, it's almost like that their intent doesn't matter. Like at the end of the day, when they're in a position of authority and this power dynamic with people, they should be held accountable. A lot of cult leaders, though, show traits of narcissism, even being sociopaths for sure.
In your work, you do a lot of, hands-on involvement with people who are in these circumstances.
Mhm.
How does it affect you personally? Are you ever do you feel in danger ever when you're doing this work?
I totally have. Not so much now, but when I first got started in the field as a case manager, my first year on the job was very scary. I had experiences with the Kingstons. They're a well known group in the Salt Lake City Valley. They operate similarly to a gang and have been called sort of the mafia of the West. It's a polygamous group, but they also believe in keeping their genetic pool, quote unquote, pure. They have trafficked young women across state lines to marry first cousins. And they are usually a very dangerous group. They have firearms, sometimes military vehicles, own a lot of businesses in the Salt Lake Valley. So I had some run ins with them, some intimidation that they would try to do that was very risky during my time there.
And so what did you do? How did you react? How did you protect yourself? What lessons did you take from that?
Sure. Something that it really instilled in me, especially in my early 20s when I did that work. I'm 30 now. I really just had so much awareness when I was doing that work that I would just be so careful. I'd always bring a colleague with me. And I also would involve the police when need be. I was very used to pulling tracking devices out from these women's cars because were being tracked, which was really awful, and would just make sure that they got to a safe place. Like protecting survivors at all times was really important to me. Became very protective over them. And I think like it really shaped me to be the fierce advocate that I was. And sometimes the police had no idea who these people were. And so I was having to simultaneously educate them.
So your event tomorrow is called The Psychology of Cults at the Florida Theater. It's at 8 o'clock, and there are tickets available at thefloridatheater.com. We've got a link on our website, but just briefly, what will people be able to see? What should they expect from the show?
Sure. It's a live event. So the first hour, I will be doing a scripted presentation. And then we'll have a brief intermission where people can scan a QR code and submit their own questions. And then the last 45 minutes of the show, I get to answer audience questions for live Q&A. And I'm so, so excited to do that. I think, like you mentioned before, there's so much information on cults now. There's a lot of documentaries, there's a lot of programs and podcasts. I'm curious to know, like, what people still want to know,
Hmm.
like what still isn't clear. And this tour is going to provide me with an opportunity to like get a temperature check into these communities. And I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, Ashlyn Weltiliard, it's great to meet you. Thanks so
Nice
much
to
for
meet
coming on
you.
today.
Thank
Appreciate it.
you.